Why the rich get richer. What if the reason you are not wealthy has nothing to do with how hard you work? Millions of people wake up early, sacrifice sleep, grind through exhausting schedules, and still remain trapped in financial stress. Meanwhile, others seem to multiply money almost effortlessly. They are not necessarily smarter. They are not always more talented. And many are not even working harder. So what is the difference? The wealthy understand a hidden principle that most people never learn. Money is attracted to systems, leverage, perception, and emotional control, not endless labor. The poor trade time for money. The wealthy build mechanisms that make money move toward them repeatedly. This audiobook reveals a psychological, behavioral, and strategic money hack the rich use to keep getting richer. It is not magic. It is not luck. It is not hype. It is a complete shift in how you think, make decisions, manage energy, and position yourself financially. If you are tired of running faster while getting nowhere, this audiobook may completely change the way you see work, wealth, and your future. Chapter 1. The lie you were taught about hard work. The harder I work, the luckier I get. Samuel Goldwyn. You have been lied to for so long that exhaustion started feeling noble. You saw people wake up before sunrise, drag themselves through traffic, come home hollow-eyed, and still wear their suffering like a badge of honor. You watch parents collapse onto couches after 12-hour shifts and call it responsibility. You heard motivational speeches glorifying sleepless nights, burnout, and endless grinding as if destroying yourself was proof you deserve success. And somewhere along the way, you accepted a dangerous idea without even realizing it, that if you just worked hard enough, life would eventually reward you. But look around carefully. Some of the hardest working people on earth are still drowning financially. Construction workers breaking their backs under brutal heat. Nurses surviving on caffeine and emotional exhaustion. Single mothers working 2 jobs while silently fighting panic every night over bills. Men destroying their bodies in warehouses while investors make more money from one decision than they make in a year of physical labor. That contradiction should disturb you, because deep down, you already know something is wrong with the equation. Hard work matters. Of course it does. Discipline matters. Effort matters. Sacrifice matters. But hard work alone? No. That belief has trapped millions of people inside a cycle that looks productive from the outside, while quietly draining the life out of them from the inside. You were taught to worship labor instead of understanding leverage. That is the real problem. The system trained you to believe money is earned only through physical effort, hours, sweat, struggle, time. You learned to exchange pieces of your life for survival, one paycheck at a time. And because everyone around you was doing the same thing, it felt normal. But normal does not mean healthy. A hamster running endlessly on a wheel is working hard too, still trapped, still moving nowhere. The truth is brutal when you finally see it clearly. If income stops the moment you stop working, you do not own freedom. You own a financial prison with slightly better furniture. And that realization hits people like cold water. Because most people never pause long enough to question the machine they are trapped inside. They just keep moving. Faster, harder, more desperate every year. They believe the answer to financial stress is simply more effort, more overtime, more hustle, more sacrifice. But you cannot solve a broken strategy by pushing harder on it. That only deepens the damage. There comes a moment in life when your body starts telling the truth your mind has been avoiding. The fatigue becomes heavier. Your patience shortens. Your dreams shrink. You stop imagining freedom and start focusing only on survival. Bills replace vision. Anxiety replaces curiosity. You wake up already tired because your spirit knows you are trapped inside repetition. That is not wealth. That is slow emotional erosion. And the frightening part is that society applauds it. People celebrate burnout as ambition. They praise exhaustion as dedication. They romanticize struggle because struggle has become culturally familiar. But there is nothing noble about destroying your health, your peace, and your identity chasing money in circles. A fire that burns without control does not create warmth. It creates ashes. The wealthy understand something most people never learn. Money does not primarily reward effort. Money rewards value, positioning, systems, and leverage. That changes everything. A man digging holes with his hands may work harder than the owner of the construction company, but the owner understands systems. A woman selling handmade products one by one online may work endlessly, while another creates a digital asset once and gets paid repeatedly for years. One person is trapped inside labor. The other has learned leverage. And leverage is the invisible force that separates survival from wealth. Leverage means using something beyond your own physical effort to multiply results. Technology, investments, teams, systems, knowledge, branding, assets, networks. The rich do not become rich because they work 24 hours a day. Nobody can. They become rich because they build structures that continue producing value long after the initial work is done. That is why one smart decision can outperform 10 years of exhausting labor. And when you first understand this, it almost feels unfair because you realize you were never taught how money actually works. You were taught how to obey, study hard, work hard, stay safe. Do not question the system. Keep moving. But nobody taught you how to make money work for you. Nobody taught you that time is more valuable than income, because time is the one thing you never recover once it burns away. Picture a man carrying buckets of water up a mountain every single day. Back bent, hands bleeding, breath heavy. People admire his work ethic. They clap for his endurance. Then another man arrives and builds a pipeline. At first, the bucket carrier laughs at him. The pipeline takes time to build. It looks slow, uncertain, risky, but eventually the water begins flowing automatically. Now one man still carries pain. The other carries vision. That is the difference between labor and leverage. And most people stay poor because they are too exhausted carrying buckets to ever build pipelines. You feel this conflict inside yourself already. Part of you wants security, predictability, safety. Another part of you knows you were meant for more than survival. That tension creates fear. Because changing your financial life requires changing your identity first. And identity shifts are uncomfortable. They feel like fire. Old beliefs collapse. Old habits resist. Old environments pull at you like gravity, trying to drag you back into familiar suffering. You start questioning everything. Why was I taught to trade all my energy for money? Why do I feel guilty resting? Why do I associate struggle with worthiness? Why do I believe exhaustion proves value? Those questions matter, because the moment you stop blindly glorifying hard work, you begin seeing opportunities differently. You stop asking, how can I work more? And you start asking, how can I create more impact with less force? That single shift can change your entire future. The wealthy think differently because they protect energy the way others protect money. They know burnout destroys clarity. Emotional chaos destroys decision-making. Constant stress traps the brain in survival mode, where creativity disappears. A starving mind cannot build vision because it is too busy putting out fires. That is why wealth creation requires emotional intelligence, not just ambition. You must become calm enough to think long-term, sharp enough to recognize opportunity, disciplined enough to delay gratification, and brave enough to stop worshiping struggle. Because the truth is, many people are addicted to hard work emotionally, not productivity, not growth. Struggle itself. It gives them identity. It makes them feel valuable, important, needed. Without struggle, they feel lost because they never learn how to exist without pressure crushing their chest. But wealth requires a different nervous system. Steady, focused, intentional, like steel forged under pressure, but not shattered by it. The people who build real wealth are not always the loudest grinders in the room. Often they are quiet observers, strategic thinkers, builders. They spend time creating assets, relationships, skills, and systems while others chase temporary income boosts that disappear as fast as they arrive. One builds a machine. The other keeps feeding the machine with their life. And eventually the gap becomes massive. You must decide which path you are walking, because years pass quickly. One day becomes 1 month. 1 month becomes 1 year. 1 year becomes a decade. And suddenly you wake up wondering where your life went. Do not wait for pain to force this realization on you. Learn it now. Your goal is not to escape effort completely. Effort will always matter. Discipline will always matter. Growth demands energy, but your effort must become intelligent, directed, multiplied through leverage instead of wasted through endless repetition. You were not born just to survive until retirement. You were born with the ability to think, create, build, adapt, and rise. That power becomes dangerous the moment you stop measuring success only by how tired you are, because exhaustion is not proof of progress. Results are. Freedom is. Peace is. Ownership is. The moment you understand that, your entire relationship with money begins to change. You stop chasing survival and start building structure. You stop glorifying burnout and start valuing clarity. You stop asking for permission and start designing a different life. And that is where wealth truly begins. Not in your wallet first, in your mind. Because the richest shift you will ever make is realizing that working harder is not always the answer. Sometimes the real answer is becoming wiser, calmer, more strategic, and bold enough to step off the wheel everyone else keeps calling success. That is the moment your life starts changing. For real. Chapter 2. Why the Rich Think Differently About Money. We become what we think about. Earl Nightingale. Most people think money changes people. It does not. Money exposes people. It magnifies what was already living inside them long before the bank account grew larger. Fear becomes greed. Insecurity becomes arrogance. Wisdom becomes expansion. Discipline becomes empire. The truth is sitting quietly beneath every financial outcome, and most people spend their entire lives staring at numbers without ever confronting the mindset producing them. That is why two people can earn the same amount of money and still live in completely different realities. One builds wealth. The other builds stress. You were told money was about math, budgeting, saving, investing, numbers on screens. But the deeper truth is harder to face. Money is emotional, painfully emotional. People do not destroy their finances because they cannot count. They destroy their finances because they cannot control themselves. They spend to feel important. They avoid investing because fear tightens around their chest. They chase quick wins because patience feels unbearable. They panic when markets fall because uncertainty exposes emotional weakness they never healed. The financial world is not just a battlefield of strategy. It is a battlefield of identity, and most people enter it psychologically unprepared. You can see it everywhere once your eyes open. A person gets paid on Friday and feels powerful for a few hours. By Monday, the money is bleeding out into things they never truly needed. Another person receives unexpected income and instantly upgrades their lifestyle instead of upgrading their future. Someone else keeps delaying opportunities because they are terrified of making the wrong decision, so they stay frozen while life keeps moving without them. It looks like money problems on the surface, but underneath, it is emotional conditioning, scarcity, fear, shame, survival. The rich think differently because they train themselves to emotionally relate to money differently. That is the real shift. A wealthy mind does not panic every time money moves. It does not worship money emotionally. It does not attach self-worth to temporary financial fluctuations. It sees money as a tool, a resource, a form of energy that must be directed intelligently, calmly, without desperation. That emotional neutrality is power. And most people never develop it because they grew up associating money with tension, arguments in the house, stress in their parents' faces, anxiety before bills were due, fear during emergencies, silence around debt, shame around failure. Those emotional memories sink deep into the nervous system. So later in life, even when opportunity appears, the body still reacts as if danger is near. That is why some people sabotage success the moment things start improving. Because wealth feels unfamiliar, and unfamiliar feels unsafe. You can work hard for years and still unconsciously push money away because your identity was shaped around struggle. That is difficult to hear, but it is true. The wealthy often think in decades while everyone else thinks in weekends. That difference alone changes everything. Most people want emotional relief immediately. They spend impulsively because they need comfort now. They avoid discomfort now. They chase pleasure now. Their decisions are driven by emotional hunger instead of long-term vision. But wealthy thinkers learn something painful early. To Delayed gratification is not punishment. It is power. The ability to sacrifice temporary pleasure for long-term freedom separates builders from consumers. One person buys liabilities to impress strangers. Another quietly buys assets that will pay them for years. One chases appearances. The other builds foundations. And foundations are rarely glamorous in the beginning. Steel is forged in unbearable heat before it becomes strong enough to hold massive structures. Wealth works the same way. The early stages often feel invisible, lonely, slow. You save when others spend. You invest when others hesitate. You study while others distract themselves. You plant seeds while nobody applauds you. And during that season, your mind gets tested because society constantly pressures you to consume instead of create, to look rich instead of becoming rich, to chase status instead of freedom. That pressure is relentless. You feel it scrolling through social media. Perfect vacations, luxury cars, designer lifestyles. Everyone performing success like actors on a stage while quietly drowning in debt behind the curtain. And if your mind is not disciplined, comparison begins poisoning your perspective. You start feeling behind. You start making emotional financial decisions just to keep up. And that is how people trap themselves for decades. The wealthy learn to detach from a need to prove themselves publicly. That is one of their greatest hidden strengths. They understand that appearances can become financial suicide. They would rather look average while building assets than look successful while bleeding money every month trying to maintain an image. That level of emotional maturity changes your entire life. Because once you stop spending for validation, you start thinking strategically. You stop asking, what will people think? And you start asking, will this create freedom? That question alone can save you years of financial pain. The rich also think differently because they train themselves to see opportunities where others only see obstacles. Most people are conditioned to focus on danger first, loss first, problems first. Their minds automatically search for reasons something will fail. And while caution is value, constant fear blinds people to possibility. Opportunity rarely arrives wrapped in certainty. It usually arrives disguised as discomfort, a risky idea, a new skill, an unfamiliar investment, a difficult decision, a season of sacrifice. Fear screams, growth whispers, and the average person obeys fear because survival feels safer than transformation. But wealthy thinkers understand something profound. Every major breakthrough in life sits behind uncertainty. Always. Nobody builds wealth without moments of doubt. Nobody transforms financially without facing emotional storms. Nobody evolves while remaining psychologically comfortable. Growth demands movement. Movement creates friction. Friction creates fear. But fear is not always a warning sign. Sometimes fear is proof you are standing near the edge of a larger life. That realization changes how you interpret discomfort. You stop running from uncertainty automatically. You start examining it intelligently. You begin asking different questions. Is this dangerous or simply unfamiliar? Am I avoiding this because it is wrong or because it challenges who I have been? That shift is massive because your financial life can only expand to the level your identity allows. Read that again slowly. Your identity controls your ceiling. If deep down you believe wealth belongs to other people, you will unconsciously reject opportunities. If you associate money with guilt, greed, or corruption, you will sabotage financial growth to remain emotionally comfortable. If struggle has become your identity, peace will feel strange to you. This is why financial transformation is deeply psychological. You are not just learning how to make money. You are learning how to become someone capable of keeping it, growing it, and using it wisely without self-destruction. That requires inner reconstruction. And reconstruction is never soft. Old beliefs collapse loudly. Old habits resist violently. The mind fights for familiarity even when familiarity is painful. But the moment your thinking changes, your behavior begins changing too. You become less reactive, more intentional, less desperate, more observant. You stop seeing money as salvation and start seeing it as responsibility. That is maturity. And maturity creates clarity. The rich are not fearless people. They simply train themselves not to emotionally drown inside temporary uncertainty. That emotional control gives them an advantage most people never develop. While others panic during downturns, they stay calm enough to recognize opportunity. While others chase emotional highs, they focus on sustainable growth. While others react impulsively, they think strategically. That difference compounds over years. Small decisions, repeated consistently, driven by disciplined thinking. That is how wealth is actually built, not through luck, not through magic, through identity. You must become someone who thinks beyond survival, someone who can hold vision during chaos, someone who does not collapse emotionally every time life applies pressure, because pressure reveals structure. Weak foundations crack, strong foundations hold, and your financial future depends on which one you build. Right now, there's a version of you waiting on the other side of this mental shift, a calmer version, a wiser version, a disciplined version, someone who no longer reacts emotionally to every financial challenge, someone who understands that wealth is not only created through income, but through thinking patterns repeated daily over time. That person already exists inside you, but they cannot emerge while you keep feeding fear, comparison, and scarcity. You must starve those patterns. You must train your mind to think bigger than your current circumstances, not blindly, not foolishly, but deliberately. Because once your identity expands, your financial reality begins expanding with it. And that is the truth most people never hear. The rich think differently because they became different internally long before money ever arrived externally. That is where wealth begins, inside, long before the world can see it.
Chapter 3. Leverage. Give me a lever long enough and a place to stand, and I will move the world. Archimedes. Most people spend their entire lives trying to push harder when they should have been learning how to multiply force. That is the tragedy. You were taught that success belongs to the person willing to suffer the longest. Wake up earlier. Stay later. Work weekends. Sacrifice sleep. Push until your body aches and your mind burns out. The world applauded exhaustion so loudly that you started believing struggle itself was the path to wealth. But there is a reason some people work endlessly and still stay stuck while others build fortunes that continue growing while they sleep. One person relies only on effort. The other understands leverage. That single difference changes everything. Leverage is the hidden engine behind almost every fortune you have ever admired. Behind the skyscrapers, the brands, the investments, the companies, the digital empires, the quiet wealth you never see posted online. It is not magic. It is not luck. It is multiplication. And once you truly understand it, you will never look at money the same way again. Picture a man trying to move a giant slab of concrete with his bare hands. Veins bulging. Sweat pouring down his face. Muscles shaking under pressure. He pushes harder and harder until exhaustion crushes him into the ground. Then another man walks over carrying a steel bar. One shift in angle. One change in mechanics. The slab moves. That is leverage. Not more force. Smarter force. The wealthy became wealthy because they stopped asking, "How much more can I do?" and started asking, "How can this continue working without me?" That question separates labor from freedom. Most people only know one way to earn money: trade time for it. Hours become income. No hours, no income. That system creates permanent pressure because your entire survival depends on constantly producing effort. You wake up already carrying emotional weight because if you stop moving, money stops moving too. That is not wealth. That is dependency disguised as productivity. And deep down, your spirit feels it. You feel it during exhausted mornings when your body is awake but your mind is drained. You feel it when vacations still carry stress because work waits for you like a storm cloud hanging over your peace. You feel it when one unexpected expense shakes your entire emotional state because there is no structure protecting you. The problem is not that you are lazy. The problem is that you were never taught leverage. The rich use time differently because they understand one brutal truth. Human energy is limited. You can only work so many hours. You can only carry so much pressure before your body starts breaking down. Your mind loses sharpness under constant stress. Creativity suffocates inside survival mode. Eventually, the machine slows down. But leverage allows your results to expand without your exhaustion expanding with them. That changes the entire game. A person writes a book once and gets paid for years. A software creator builds one tool that thousands of people use daily. An investor puts money into assets that grow while they sleep. A business owner creates systems where teams produce value without constant supervision. A content creator records a video once and reaches millions. That is leverage in motion. Work done once. Value delivered repeatedly. Meanwhile, most people stay trapped inside repetition. They restart their financial life every single month from zero. Another paycheck. Another cycle. Another sprint just to stay afloat. Like running on a treadmill that never stops speeding up. That cycle quietly steals hope from people. Because the harder they work, the more confused they become when freedom still feels far away. And eventually frustration turns into emotional exhaustion. You begin questioning yourself. Why am I still struggling? Why does it feel like I can never get ahead? How are other people scaling so fast? The answer is painful but simple. Effort without leverage has limits. Always. A candle can only burn so long before the flame dies. Leverage creates fire that keeps spreading. There are different forms of leverage, and the wealthy stack them together like layers of armor. Time leverage means building systems that free your hours instead of consuming them endlessly. Technology leverage means using software, automation, and digital tools to scale work beyond human limits. Capital leverage means using money itself to create more money through investments and ownership. Knowledge leverage means learning valuable skills once and applying them repeatedly across opportunities. Network leverage means relationships opening doors that effort alone could never force open. And then there is brand leverage. One of the most underestimated forces in modern wealth. A trusted name can move faster than years of cold effort. People buy confidence, credibility, familiarity. One person spends decades fighting for attention while another builds trust once and attracts opportunities repeatedly because their reputation compounds over time. That is leverage too. Everything wealthy people build eventually begins working on their behalf. That is why they become difficult to compete with. Not because they are superhuman. Because they stopped relying only on human energy. This is where people misunderstand leverage completely. They think it removes effort. It does not.
Leverage requires intense effort in the beginning. The difference is where the effort goes. Most people spend their lives feeding temporary tasks that disappear tomorrow. Leverage focuses effort on building structures that continue producing long after the initial work is complete. One person digs a hole daily for survival. Another builds a machine. The machine takes longer up front. It requires patience, learning, frustration, discipline, delayed gratification. There are moments when it feels unfair because others appear to be moving faster, while you're still laying foundations nobody can see. But foundations matter, especially when storms arrive. And storms always arrive. A person without leverage loses one paycheck and immediately feels panic tightening around their chest. But someone with assets, systems, investments, networks, and scalable income streams experiences life differently. They still face challenges, but they are not standing emotionally naked in front of uncertainty. Leverage creates breathing room, and breathing room creates clarity. That clarity changes the quality of your decisions. Most poor financial decisions are emotional reactions to pressure. Desperation makes people impulsive. Fear shortens vision. Stress destroys patience. But leverage reduces emotional chaos because you are no longer depending entirely on constant labor to survive. That emotional freedom is powerful because wealth is not just financial. It is psychological. The truly wealthy person is not simply someone with money. It is someone whose mind is no longer chained to survival every waking moment. And that begins the moment you stop thinking only like a worker and start thinking like a builder. Builders ask different questions. How can this scale? How can this continue producing value? How can I own instead of only consume? How can I create once and benefit repeatedly? Those questions reshape your future. You start noticing opportunities differently. You stop spending every dollar on temporary pleasure and start directing resources toward assets. You stop chasing fast money emotionally and begin creating systems patiently. You stop measuring productivity only by physical exhaustion, because exhaustion is not always proof of progress. Sometimes it is proof you are carrying life inefficiently. A man cutting wood with a dull blade may work twice as hard as another man with sharpened tool. Harder effort, worse results. That is how millions live financially, grinding endlessly without ever sharpening the system itself. But once your mind shifts, you cannot unsee it anymore. You begin realizing that the goal is not to become the hardest working person in the room. The goal is to become the most intentional, the most strategic, the most scalable. You start protecting your energy differently because you understand energy is currency. Attention is currency. Time is currency. Every wasted year repeating ineffective patterns carries a cost heavier than money. Life moves fast, too fast, and there comes a moment when you realize you cannot spend the next 20 years building someone else's dream while neglecting your own future. You cannot continue sacrificing peace just to maintain survival. You cannot keep restarting from zero every month while hoping exhaustion eventually transforms into freedom. It will not without leverage. This chapter is not asking you to stop working. It is asking you to stop working blindly. There is a difference. Real wealth begins when your effort starts creating momentum beyond your physical presence, when your knowledge compounds, when your systems expand, when your investments grow roots, when your reputation opens doors, when your assets continue moving even while you rest. That is when life changes, quietly at first, then dramatically. And the beautiful part is this: you do not need to become someone else to begin. You simply need to think differently from the version of you that believed struggle alone was enough. Because the real money hack was never about working endlessly. It was about learning how to multiply yourself. That is leverage. And once you understand it, you stop living like a candle burning out in the dark. You start building fire that keeps spreading long after you leave the room. Chapter 4. Stop selling time and start building assets. If you don't find a way to make money while you sleep, you will work until you die. Warren Buffett. There is a quiet pain that millions of people carry but rarely speak about. It shows up on Sunday nights when the chest feels heavy thinking about Monday morning. It appears in exhausted eyes staring at alarm clocks before sunrise. It hides inside conversations where people joke about being tired because admitting the truth would break them emotionally. The truth is this: most people are not building a life. They are renting themselves out hour by hour just to survive. And the terrifying part is how normal it has become. Wake up, work, get paid, pay bills, repeat. Years pass like this, then decades. And somewhere in the middle of that cycle, many people slowly lose connection with the dreams they once carried inside themselves. Not because they are incapable, not because they are lazy, but because survival consumed all their energy before vision ever had a chance to breathe. That is what selling time does to people. It traps human potential inside repetition. You were taught that earning money meant sacrificing hours, that your value was measured by attendance, availability, and physical effort. The more hours you gave away, the more secure your future would become. But look closely at the contradiction. The very system people call security often leaves them emotionally fragile, one missed paycheck away from panic. That is not freedom. That is dependency with a schedule. And deep down, you already know it. You feel it when you realize your income stops the moment your labor stops. You feel it when illness, burnout, or unexpected emergencies threaten your entire financial stability. You feel it when you understand that no matter how hard you work, there are still only 24 hours in a day. Human effort has limits. Time has limits. Your body has limits. That is why wealthy people think differently. They stopped building income only through effort and started building assets. That single shift changes the architecture of a person's life forever. An asset is something that continues producing value after the initial work is done. It keeps moving, keeps generating, keeps expanding, sometimes quietly, sometimes powerfully, but it does not require your constant physical presence every second to survive. That is the difference. Most people earn once. The wealthy build things that earn repeatedly. And once you truly understand that, your relationship with work begins changing forever. Imagine two men carrying buckets of water from a river every day under brutal heat, one bucket at a time. back aching, hands raw, sweat dripping into the dirt beneath them. If they stop carrying, the water stops flowing. Then another man arrives and spends months building a pipeline. At first, people laugh at him. The pipeline takes longer. It looks uncertain. There is no immediate reward. But eventually the water begins flowing continuously. Now, while others still exhaust themselves carrying buckets daily, the pipeline keeps producing without constant labor. That is what assets do. They disconnect income from constant physical effort. And that is where true freedom begins. Most people never build assets because survival mode keeps them emotionally trapped in short-term thinking. When pressure is heavy, immediate money feels more urgent than long-term creation. Bills scream louder than vision. Fear shortens perspective. So people stay locked inside cycles that demand endless labor because they cannot emotionally tolerate slower forms of wealth building. That is why mindset matters so deeply. Building assets requires patience. And patience is emotional discipline. A person trapped in survival wants fast relief, fast money, fast comfort, fast validation. But assets often grow quietly at first like roots underground before anything visible appears above the surface. That invisible stage breaks weak minds. Because society worships immediate results. People applaud visible hustle while ignoring silent construction happening behind the scenes. But wealthy people understand something most never learn. The strongest financial structures are usually built in seasons where nobody is clapping for you. A writer spends months creating a book that could generate income for years. A musician records songs once that continue streaming endlessly. A software developer builds an app that serves thousands. An investor acquires assets that appreciate while time passes. A business owner creates systems where operations continue even when they are absent. A content creator uploads videos that keep attracting audiences long after recording them. That is asset thinking. Create once, benefit repeatedly, and notice something important. Most of these assets begin with effort, real effort, long nights, confusion, failure, doubt, learning curves, uncertainty. But unlike ordinary labor, the effort compounds. That is the difference. A normal paycheck resets every month. Assets keep building momentum. Momentum changes lives. You can feel the emotional difference between the two paths. One creates constant pressure because survival depends entirely on continuous output. The other slowly creates breathing room, margin, space to think clearly again. And clarity is priceless because exhausted people rarely make wise long-term decisions. Stress narrows vision. Pressure creates desperation. Desperation creates poor choices. That is why people trapped in constant labor often remain financially stuck, even while working incredibly hard. Their energy is consumed maintaining survival instead of building structure. They are trying to climb mountains carrying cement on their backs. Every step hurts. But asset builders think differently. They ask questions that most people never ask. How can this continue producing? How can this scale? How can I own instead of endlessly renting out my energy? How can I build something today that still serves me years from now? Those questions change the direction of a life. You stop thinking only about owning. You start thinking about ownership. And ownership is where wealth expands. Ownership of businesses. Ownership of investments. Ownership of intellectual property. Ownership of systems. Ownership of brands. Ownership of ideas. The wealthy understand that ownership creates leverage while endless labor creates dependency. That truth can feel uncomfortable at first because it forces you to confront how much of your life has been spent reacting instead of building. But discomfort is not your enemy here. Discomfort is awakening you. Because once your eyes open, you cannot keep pretending exhaustion alone is a strategy. It is not. You must build something that outlives your daily effort. Something that keeps breathing financially even while you rest. And no, this does not mean everyone must become a billionaire entrepreneur. That misunderstanding keeps people stuck too. Asset building can begin small, quietly, imperfectly. A small investment, a digital skill, a side business, a platform, a piece of content, a product, a system, a growing portfolio. The size matters less than the direction, because direction determines destiny. A tiny asset moving consistently in the right direction can eventually outperform years of exhausting labor with no leverage attached to it. That is the power of compounding. Small actions, repeated consistently, growing silently over time, like steel forged layer by layer under relentless heat. At first, nothing dramatic appears to happen. Then one day the structure becomes undeniable. This is also why wealthy people value learning differently. They do not just learn for information. They learn for scalability. A valuable skill can become income. Income can become investment. Investment can become ownership. Ownership can become freedom. That chain reaction starts with changing how you think. Because poor financial conditioning teaches people to consume first and build later. But builders reverse that pattern. They create first, then enjoy the rewards later from a position of strength. That takes emotional maturity, especially in a world addicted to instant gratification. You will feel temptation constantly. People around you spending recklessly, chasing appearances, performing success online while secretly drowning in financial pressure. The world will pressure you to look rich before becoming financially secure. Resist that trap. Real wealth often grows quietly in the beginning, like fire hidden beneath steel. Invisible, hot, transformative. Then eventually the results become impossible to ignore. You reach a point where money no longer feels tied to every single movement of your body. Your income sources begin expanding. Your stress decreases. Your choices widen. You breathe differently because survival no longer controls every thought. That feeling, that space, that freedom, it changes a person internally. Because the goal was never simply to make more money. The goal was to reclaim your life. To stop selling every ounce of your energy just to stay afloat. To stop waking up terrified that one bad month could collapse everything you built. To create structures strong enough to carry you through storms. And storms will come. Life guarantees that. But assets give you resilience, stability, breathing room during chaos. They create options. And options are one of the greatest forms of power a human being can possess. You deserve more than endless survival. You deserve a life where your effort creates momentum instead of permanent exhaustion. That life begins the moment you stop asking only, how much can I earn today? And start asking, what can I build that will still serve me tomorrow? That question has built fortunes. More importantly, Chapter 5, Emotional Intelligence, the wealth skill nobody talks about. He who conquers himself is the mightiest warrior. Confucius. Most people think wealth is built with intelligence. It is not. Some of the smartest people in the world are drowning in debt, trapped in emotional chaos, sabotaging every financial opportunity that enters their lives. High IQ means nothing when fear controls your decisions. Knowledge means nothing when insecurity keeps pulling your hand towards self-destruction. The truth is harder than people want to admit. Money does not disappear because people are stupid. It disappears because people are emotional. That realization changes everything. You can study investing for years, memorize business strategies, understand markets, and still destroy your financial future because you never learn how to manage yourself. Fear can make a brilliant person freeze. Ego can make a successful person reckless. Impulse can burn through years of hard work in one emotional decision. And most people never realize they are not fighting a money battle. They are fighting themselves. You have seen it happen before. Someone receives a raise, then immediately upgrades their lifestyle because emotionally they need to feel important. Another person gets into debt buying things they cannot afford because they are trying to silence insecurity with appearances. Someone else panics during financial uncertainty and sells investments at the worst possible moment because fear hijacks logic like a storm ripping through weak foundations. It looks financial on the surface, but underneath, it is emotional instability wearing expensive clothes. That is why emotional intelligence is one of the most powerful wealth skills a human being can develop, and almost nobody talks about it. People will teach you how to make money. Few will teach you how not to emotionally destroy it once you have it, because wealth is not only built through strategy, it is protected through self-control. You must understand this deeply. Every financial decision carries emotion inside it. Every purchase, every investment, every risk, every negotiation, every opportunity. Emotion is always in the room. The question is whether emotion controls you or whether you have learned to remain steady under pressure. That steadiness is power, real power. The wealthy people who sustain success for decades are rarely the loudest or most dramatic. Often they are emotionally composed, calm thinkers, strategic responders. They do not collapse every time life applies pressure. They do not make reckless moves because their feelings temporarily spike. They know how to pause inside emotional storms instead of drowning in them. That ability creates massive separation over time, because poor emotional decisions compound just like wise financial decisions do. One impulsive purchase seems harmless. Repeated for years, it becomes financial damage. One emotionally driven investment mistake seems temporary. Repeated consistently, it becomes wealth destruction. One insecure attempt to look successful may feel exciting for a moment, but repeated endlessly, it creates chains disguised as luxury. That is why emotional spending is so dangerous. Most people are not buying things because they truly need them. They are buying emotional relief. Relief from stress. Relief from insecurity. Relief from comparison. Relief from emptiness. A hard day turns into online shopping. A painful emotion turns into reckless spending. Social pressure turns into financial self-sabotage. People spend money trying to repair feelings they never learn how to face directly. And corporations understand this perfectly. Entire industries are built around emotional manipulation. They sell identity, status, validation, escape. They know emotionally reactive people are easier to control because insecurity creates consumption. That is why emotional intelligence is financial armor. Without it, the world can pull money out of your pockets through your emotions endlessly. Fear says, spend now. Ego says, show them. Comparison says, you are behind. Impulse says, you deserve it. Insecurity says, this will make you enough. And if you never develop emotional awareness, those voices quietly run your life. The rich think differently because they learn how to separate feelings from decisions. Not completely. They are still human. They still feel pressure, uncertainty, fear, excitement. But they do not obey every emotion that enters their mind. That discipline creates stability, and stability creates clarity. Imagine standing in the middle of a violent storm while everyone around you is panicking. Rain crashing sideways, wind bending steel, chaos everywhere. Most people react emotionally under pressure. They make rushed choices because discomfort overwhelms them. But emotionally intelligent people breathe first. They observe. They think. They remain grounded while others collapse into reaction. That same principle applies financially. When markets crash, emotionally reactive people panic. Emotionally intelligent people evaluate. When opportunities appear, emotionally reactive people hesitate from fear. Emotionally intelligent people assess risk calmly. When negotiations become tense, reactive people let ego take control. Emotionally intelligent people stay composed long enough to create better outcomes. That difference changes lives, because emotional control protects long-term vision, and long-term vision is where wealth grows. Most people cannot delay gratification because their emotions constantly demand immediate relief. Waiting feels painful. Patience feels uncomfortable. Discipline feels restrictive. So they trade future freedom for temporary comfort over and over again. That cycle destroys potential. The wealthy understand that emotions are temporary, but consequences can last decades. That is maturity, not suppressing feelings. Mastering them. There is a huge difference. Suppressed emotions eventually explode, but master emotions become fuel. They sharpen awareness instead of controlling behavior. You stop reacting automatically. You begin responding intentionally. That shift feels small at first, but over time, it changes everything. You stop making desperate decisions during difficult seasons. You stop trying to impress people financially. You stop confusing external validation with internal worth. You stop chasing emotional highs that leave you emptier afterward. Instead, you become steady, and steadiness is rare, especially in a world addicted to emotional chaos. Look around carefully. People are constantly emotionally triggered. News cycles, social media, fear-based marketing, endless comparison, everyone reacting, everyone consuming emotionally, everyone chasing stimulation, while their inner world remains unstable. That instability leaks directly into finances. Because a scattered mind struggles to build structured wealth. A reactive person struggles to think long-term. An insecure person struggles to build peacefully. An impulsive person struggles to sustain success. That is why emotional intelligence is not soft. It is steel, forged under pressure. You build it by facing discomfort instead of escaping it, by sitting with fear long enough to think clearly, by resisting the urge to react impulsively, by learning how to remain emotionally grounded while uncertainty swirls around you like fire in the wind. That process transforms you internally, and internal transformation always appears externally eventually. You begin negotiating differently because insecurity no longer controls your voice. You stop underpricing yourself out of fear. You stop over-explaining your worth. You stop shrinking in rooms where opportunity exists. Calm confidence replaces emotional desperation. People feel that energy immediately because emotionally intelligent individuals carry a different presence. Their decisions feel deliberate. Their communication feels steady. Their actions feel intentional instead of chaotic. That presence attracts trust. Trust creates opportunity. Opportunity creates wealth. Everything connects. You also stop fearing financial uncertainty the same way most people do. Uncertainty no longer feels like immediate danger. You understand that storms are part of growth. Markets fluctuate. Businesses struggle. Investments rise and fall. Life shifts constantly. Emotionally weak people collapse during uncertainty because they expect life to always feel stable. Emotionally intelligent people adapt, like strong trees bending during violent wind instead of snapping under pressure. That adaptability becomes one of your greatest financial strengths, because wealth is not built by people who never experience fear. It is built by people who know how to move intelligently while fear exists. That is courage, not emotional numbness. Courage. And courage changes what becomes possible for your life. Right now, there are emotional patterns shaping your financial future, whether you realize it or not. Patterns around stress, spending, self-worth, patience, risk, validation, scarcity. Every unresolved emotional habit quietly influences your money decisions. That means building wealth requires more than financial education. It requires emotional evolution. You must become someone capable of handling success without self-destruction. Someone capable of remaining calm during pressure. Someone capable of thinking clearly while others panic emotionally. Someone who no longer needs money to prove their worth because their identity is already grounded internally. That person becomes dangerous in the best possible way. Because once emotions stop controlling your financial behavior, your decisions become sharper, cleaner, more strategic. Your future stops being driven by temporary feelings and starts being built through intentional action, repeated consistently over time. That is where true financial power begins. Not in your bank account first, in your nervous system, in your discipline, in your ability to remain centered while the world loses its mind around you. Because money flows differently toward people who have mastered themselves. And the greatest investment you will ever make is becoming emotionally strong enough to hold the wealth you are asking life to give you. Chapter 6. The Power of Strategic Relationships. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Jim Rohn. There are people in your life quietly shaping your future right now. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, through conversations, through energy, through beliefs, through standards, through the things they normalize around you every single day. And most people never realize how deeply their environment is programming them until years later when they look around and wonder why they stayed stuck for so long. Because the truth is painful. Your life rarely rises above the emotional and psychological temperature of the people surrounding you. If you stay around people who fear growth, you will begin shrinking without noticing. If you stay around people who normalize excuses, your ambition slowly weakens. If you stay around people who constantly complain, blame, gossip, and live in survival thinking, your mind absorbs that emotional atmosphere like smoke filling lungs over time. Human beings are porous. We absorb energy. Standards spread. Mindsets transfer. And whether you realize it or not, the people closest to you are constantly influencing what feels possible for your life. That is why wealthy people protect their environments so carefully. Not because they think they are better than others, because they understand proximity is power. You can feel this truth in your own life already. Think about the moments when you felt most inspired, most focused, most alive. Usually, there was someone around you who expanded your thinking, someone whose energy challenged your limitations, someone who carried vision differently, discipline differently, confidence differently. Their presence pulled something higher out of you. Now think about the opposite. The people who drain your ambition, the conversations that leave you emotionally heavy, the environments where dreaming bigger feels dangerous because mediocrity has become the unspoken agreement everyone protects. You feel smaller there, not because your potential disappeared, because your environment keeps suffocating it. That is why strategic relationships matter so deeply in wealth creation. Nobody builds greatness completely alone. That myth destroys people. Yes, discipline matters. Personal responsibility matters. But relationships accelerate everything. Opportunities move through people. Knowledge moves through people. Capital moves through people. Confidence moves through people. Doors open through people. And the wealthy understand this at a level most never do. They intentionally place themselves around people who think bigger, move smarter, and challenge them to evolve. That changes your trajectory faster than effort alone ever could. Imagine trying to build a fire during a violent storm. Wind everywhere. Rain crashing down. Every spark struggling to survive. That is what ambition feels like inside toxic environments. You spend more energy protecting your vision than actually building it. Now imagine placing that same fire inside a protected space, surrounded by dry wood and oxygen. Everything changes. The flame expands naturally. That is what powerful environments do to human potential. They multiply growth. And most people underestimate how much of their struggle is connected to who they are constantly around. If everyone near you thinks small, playing small begins feeling normal. If everyone around you fears risk, courage begins feeling irresponsible. If everyone around you mocks ambition, success starts feeling lonely. That emotional pressure is real. People unconsciously attack what challenges their comfort zone. When you begin changing, it forces others to confront the areas where they remain stagnant. Your growth becomes a mirror they did not ask to look into. So they criticize, they doubt, they minimize your vision. Not always because they hate you, sometimes because your expansion threatens the identity they built around staying the same. And if you are not emotionally strong, you will shrink yourself just to maintain acceptance. That is one of the saddest forms of self-betrayal a human being can commit. Trading your future for temporary belonging. The wealthy learn how to make a difficult but necessary shift. They stop choosing relationships only based on familiarity and start choosing environments based on alignment. Alignment with growth, alignment with discipline, alignment with vision, alignment with possibility. That does not mean becoming cold or arrogant. It means becoming intentional, because every room affects you, every conversation affects you, every emotional atmosphere affects you. You cannot continuously stand inside negativity and expect your mind to remain powerful. It is impossible. People talk constantly about motivation, but environment often matters more. A strong person inside a toxic environment eventually becomes exhausted. But an average person inside a powerful environment often begins transforming naturally because expectations rise around them. Standards shape identity. That is why strategic relationships create acceleration. One conversation with the right person can collapse years of confusion. One mentor can save you from costly mistakes. One opportunity introduced through a network can change your financial future forever. That is not luck. That is proximity. The wealthy know this. That is why they invest in relationships differently. They understand networking is not fake handshakes and forced conversations. Real strategic relationships are built through value, trust, consistency, and mutual growth. People open doors for people they trust emotionally. That is how opportunities move. A businessman hears your name in a room because someone respected your character. A collaboration appears because your reputation traveled ahead of you. An investment opportunity arrives because someone believes in your discipline. Relationships create invisible bridges. And many people never cross into greater opportunities because they isolate themselves emotionally or stay trapped in environments that keep reinforcing limitation. You must become aware of who is shaping your thinking daily. That awareness changes everything. Some relationships fuel growth, others drain destiny. And you can often feel the difference immediately after leaving conversations. Some people leave you energized, clear-minded, focused. Others leave you emotionally exhausted without even understanding why. Energy transfers. Mindsets transfer. Beliefs transfer. That is why emotionally intelligent, wealthy people guard their circles carefully. They understand negativity spreads like rust on steel. Slowly, quietly, destructively. You do not need massive crowds around you. You need aligned people. People who sharpen you. People who challenge excuses. People who expand your vision. People who normalize growth instead of fear. Because what feels normal around you eventually becomes your reality. If debt is normalized around you, financial struggle begins feeling inevitable. If discipline is normalized around you, growth begins feeling natural. If ownership is normalized around you, building wealth starts feeling possible. Normal matters more than motivation. And many people stay trapped because they build emotional homes inside environments that reward stagnation. That realization hurts, especially when some of those environments involve people you love deeply. But growth often requires difficult emotional decisions. Not always cutting people off completely, but changing access, changing influence, changing proximity. Because you cannot keep surrounding yourself with emotional anchors while trying to build a life that requires expansion. At some point, you must choose your future over familiarity. That choice changes people internally. You stop seeking approval from people who do not understand your vision. You stop shrinking your dreams to make others comfortable. You stop apologizing for wanting more from life. That confidence grows stronger when you're around people who reinforce possibility instead of fear. And something powerful begins happening. Your standards rise automatically. You think differently, move differently, speak differently. Expect more from yourself, not from ego, from exposure. Because once you spend time around disciplined, growth-minded individuals, you realize how much potential was buried beneath your old environment. You see new possibilities for income, for investments, for business, for life. Your imagination expands. And imagination matters because wealth is built twice, first in the mind, then in reality. That is why strategic relationships are not optional for growth. They are fuel. Nobody climbs mountains carrying emotional dead weight forever. Eventually, you either release what keeps pulling you downward or you remain trapped beneath the altitude your current environment allows. This chapter is not telling you to become fake, transactional, or manipulative. Real wealth relationships are deeply human, built on integrity, value, respect, growth. But you must stop underestimating how much your circle affects your future, because your environment is either feeding your fire or pouring water on it every day. And deep down, you already know which one you have been living inside. The beautiful part is this: you can change it. You can enter new rooms, learn new skills, build new relationships, find mentors, seek healthier environments, expose your mind to people who challenge the limits you inherited. One new connection can redirect your entire life. That is how powerful proximity is. The wealthy rarely rise alone because human beings were never designed to grow in complete isolation. We evolve through connection, through shared vision, through aligned energy moving in the same direction. So choose your environment carefully now. Choose conversations carefully. Choose influence carefully. Because every relationship is either building your future or quietly teaching you to settle for less than you were capable of becoming. Chapter 7. The Hidden Cost of Looking Rich. We buy things we don't need with money. We don't have to impress people we don't like. Dave Ramsey. One of the most dangerous financial traps in the modern world does not look dangerous at all. It looks attractive, polished, successful. It wears designer labels, drives expensive cars, posts filter vacations online, and smiles for pictures while drowning quietly in pressure nobody else can see. And every day, millions of people destroy their financial future, trying to maintain an image they cannot afford. That is the hidden cost of looking rich, the pain of pretending, the exhaustion of performing success before actually building it. Some people spend their entire lives chasing appearances because deep down they believe visibility equals value. They think expensive things will finally make them feel respected, important, secure, enough. But external validation is a fire that never stops demanding fuel. No purchase satisfies it for long. A new car creates excitement for a few weeks. A luxury watch creates temporary attention. A bigger house creates a brief emotional high. Then silence returns. And underneath the polished image, the same insecurity remains waiting to be fed again. That cycle traps people financially for decades. Because consumer culture is not designed to make you free. It is designed to make you emotionally dependent on consumption. The system studies human insecurity carefully. It understands fear, comparison, loneliness, status, ego. It knows people often buy emotionally first and logically later. That is why advertisements rarely sell products directly. They sell identity. They sell the illusion of becoming someone more valuable after purchasing something external. And people fall into the trap because emotionally they are starving for significance. Yeah, I've probably felt this pressure before. Scrolling through social media late at night, seeing people your age appearing successful, luxury everywhere, perfect lifestyles, perfect bodies, perfect relationships. Everyone looking ahead while secretly many are financially bleeding beneath the surface. And if you are not emotionally grounded, comparison starts poisoning your thinking slowly. You begin feeling behind, not because your life lacks value, because someone else's performance manipulated your perception. That emotional pressure creates dangerous financial behavior. People stretch themselves thin trying to look successful instead of becoming financially strong. They finance lifestyles instead of building assets. They chase visibility instead of stability. They spend money they have not earned, yet trying to impress people who are too distracted by their own insecurities to care for long anyway. It is a brutal cycle, and society rewards it constantly. People clap for appearances long before they understand ownership. Someone driving an expensive car receives admiration instantly, even if the bank technically owns most of it. Meanwhile, a disciplined investor quietly building assets receives little attention because true wealth often looks ordinary in the beginning. That difference matters because real wealth and the appearance of wealth are completely different worlds. One creates freedom, the other creates pressure, and pressure eventually exposes everything fake. Many people you think are wealthy are actually financially fragile. One economic storm, one job loss, one emergency, one market shift away from collapse. Their lifestyle looks powerful, but underneath it is anxiety, debt, and emotional exhaustion. That is not wealth. That is performance. Real wealth feels different. Calmer, less desperate, less noisy. Real wealth does not need constant attention because its confidence comes from ownership, not validation. The truly wealthy often think carefully before spending. They understand every dollar spent carelessly is a worker removed from building future freedom. They do not obsess over looking rich because they are focused on becoming financially unshakable. That mindset changes everything. Most people ask, how can I afford this? Wealthy thinkers ask, will this increase or decrease my freedom? That question alone can save someone years of financial pain because freedom, not appearance, is the real goal. Freedom to breathe without panic. Freedom to make choices without desperation. Freedom to rest without financial terror, controlling your nervous system. But none of that comes from trying to impress strangers. It comes from discipline. Quiet discipline. The kind nobody applauds immediately. There's a strange loneliness that comes with choosing long-term wealth over short-term appearance. Sometimes people will misunderstand your restraint. They may think you lack ambition because you are not constantly displaying status symbols. Society often confuses consumption with success. But wise people understand something deeper. The loudest financial lives are often the weakest structurally, like buildings with beautiful paint hiding cracked foundations. And eventually, pressure reveals the truth. You can see it everywhere now. People trapped in lifestyles they cannot emotionally or financially sustain. Constant upgrades, bigger payments, More debt, more pressure, more emotional exhaustion disguised as success. Because lifestyle inflation is addictive, the moment income rises, many people immediately raise expenses to match it. Instead of increasing investments, they increase appearances. Instead of buying assets, they buy symbols. And the trap becomes invisible because externally, life appears improved. But internally, nothing changed. They are still financially dependent, still emotionally reactive, still one crisis away from instability. That is why true wealth requires emotional maturity. You must become strong enough to resist the temptation of external validation, strong enough to delay unnecessary gratification, strong enough to build quietly while others perform loudly. That strength is rare now, because modern culture constantly whispers the same dangerous message. Show people you made it. But real power moves differently. Real power builds foundations first. Imagine two men standing before a storm. One spent years decorating the outside of his house, while ignoring the structure beneath it. The other focused obsessively on reinforcing foundations nobody could see. When the storm arrives, appearances stop matching. Only structure survives pressure. Financial life works the same way. Economic storms expose everything weak, and they always come eventually. That is why ownership matters more than image. Assets matter more than applause. Stability matters more than temporary status. A person with investments, cash flow, skills, and emotional discipline carries a different kind of confidence through life. Quiet confidence, unshakable confidence. Not because they need everyone to admire them, because they know they built something real. And once you experience that feeling internally, the desire to impress people starts fading naturally. You stop buying things for emotional approval. You stop measuring your worth through possessions. You stop chasing lifestyles that secretly imprison you. Instead, you begin protecting your peace, protecting your future, protecting your freedom. That shift feels spiritual, almost, because you finally break free from emotional slavery disguised as luxury. You realize many purchases were never about the item itself. They were about identity wounds, childhood insecurity, fear of judgment, desire for recognition, need for belonging. Once you heal those emotional patterns, your relationship with money transforms completely. You spend differently, think differently, move differently. Money stops being a tool for proving yourself and becomes a tool for building your life intentionally. That is a massive psychological shift, and it separates people who stay trapped from those who eventually build lasting wealth. The wealthy understand delayed gratification at a deep level. They are willing to look less successful temporarily while building long-term strength underneath the surface. They know seeds buried underground appear invisible before forests eventually emerge. Most people cannot tolerate that invisible stage. Their ego demands visible rewards too quickly, so they sabotage long-term growth for short-term image. Do not fall into that trap. There is nothing powerful about looking rich while privately panicking every month. There is nothing admirable about drowning in debt to maintain appearances. There is nothing freeing about building a lifestyle that owns you emotionally. Choose substance over performance. Choose ownership over image. Choose peace over applause. And understand this clearly. Some of the wealthiest people in the world walk quietly. Simple clothes, calm energy, focused minds. They are not trying to prove anything, because internally they already know who they are. That is real wealth, not desperation disguised as luxury, not emotional spending disguised as success, not debt-covered appearances pretending to be power. Real wealth creates stability inside your mind first, then it expands outward into your life. So the next time you feel pressure to impress people, pause for a moment, breathe, ask yourself honestly, am I building freedom or performing success? That question can change your financial destiny forever, because the people who truly become wealthy are usually not the ones screaming for attention. They are the ones quietly building lives strong enough that they no longer need anyone's approval to feel valuable. Chapter 8. Build systems that make money automatically. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence is not an act but a habit. Aristotle. Most people are trying to change their financial life using emotion. That is the problem. They wait until they feel motivated. They wait for the perfect mood, the perfect month, the perfect breakthrough moment where discipline suddenly becomes effortless. So they make promises during emotional highs and abandon them during emotional lows. That cycle keeps repeating because motivation is unstable. One day you feel unstoppable. The next day life punches you in the chest, and suddenly your goals disappear beneath stress, exhaustion, distractions, and survival pressure. That is why wealthy people do not rely on motivation. They build systems, and systems change everything. A motivated person can succeed temporarily. A person with strong systems can succeed consistently. There is a massive difference between the two. Consistency creates wealth, not intensity, not emotional excitement. Consistency. Small actions repeated over time become forces powerful enough to completely transform a life. But most people underestimate this because human beings are addicted to dramatic change. They want overnight success, massive breakthroughs, instant transformation. Yet real wealth is usually built quietly, one decision at a time, one habit at a time, one automatic action, repeated long enough until momentum becomes unstoppable, like water cutting through stone, not through force, through repetition. The wealthy understand something deeply that struggling people often ignore. Every successful life is built on invisible systems. Behind every thriving business sits a system. Behind every healthy investment portfolio sits a system. Behind every financially disciplined person sits a system. Without systems, people fall back into emotional decision-making, and emotions are unreliable under pressure. You have probably experienced this yourself already. You tell yourself you will save money, then stress hits and you spend impulsively. You promise yourself you will invest consistently, then fear or distraction interrupts the pattern. You create goals, then life becomes chaotic, and suddenly your focus collapses. It is not always because you are lazy. Often it is because your life lacks structure. And structure creates freedom far more than people realize. That sounds backward at first. Most people think freedom means doing whatever you want whenever you want. But real freedom often comes from reducing chaos. Because chaos drains energy. Decision fatigue drains energy. Constantly negotiating with yourself drains energy. Wealthy people understand this, so they automate important behaviors whenever possible. They reduce unnecessary emotional friction. They create routines and systems that continue operating even when emotions fluctuate. That is intelligence, not making life harder than it needs to be. Imagine trying to push a massive steel wheel uphill every single morning from complete stillness. That is how life feels when everything depends entirely on willpower. Exhausting, heavy, inconsistent. Now imagine building momentum once and allowing the wheel to keep moving. That is what systems do. They carry you forward even on difficult days. And difficult days always come. That is why systems outperform motivation every time. A system does not care if you feel tired. A system does not care if you feel inspired. A system keeps moving. Automatic savings, automatic investing, automatic business processes, automatic income channels, automatic routines. The wealthy build financial lives that continue functioning without requiring constant emotional effort every second. That changes the game completely. Because once positive financial behavior becomes automatic, growth begins compounding quietly in the background of your life. And compounding is one of the most powerful forces in existence. Tiny repeated actions become enormous outcomes over time. A small amount invested consistently grows. A daily habit improves. A business system scales. A brand expands. A skill compounds. Most people quit too early because the beginning feels invisible. The results are small at first, almost painfully small. That stage breaks emotionally impatient people. But disciplined individuals understand something crucial. The first phase of compounding is always the slowest. Like planting seeds beneath frozen ground. Nothing appears to happen for a long time. Then suddenly the growth becomes undeniable. That is why systems require faith in delayed results. Not blind faith, disciplined faith. The kind rooted in understanding how momentum works. Look at financially successful people carefully. Many are not working harder every single day. than everyone else around them. Often they simply built stronger systems earlier, systems that organize money, time, decisions, and opportunities efficiently. Their lives are structured, and structure protects energy, because energy matters. A mentally exhausted person makes poor financial decisions. Constant stress weakens discipline. Chaos creates impulsiveness. But systems reduce emotional overload by removing unnecessary choices. You do not debate whether to invest. It happens automatically. You do not rely on memory to save money. The system handles it. You do not rebuild productivity from scratch every day. Your routines already guide your actions. That stability creates power, especially in modern life where distraction attacks constantly. The world profits from your inconsistency. Every distraction economy is built around pulling your attention away from long-term goals. Endless scrolling, endless stimulation, endless emotional noise. And distracted people rarely build wealth effectively, because wealth requires sustained direction, not scattered energy. That is why systems are spiritual in a strange way. They protect your future self from your current emotional state. They create alignment between who you are today and who you are trying to become. That alignment matters deeply. Without it, people remain trapped in cycles of starting over repeatedly, starting over financially, starting over emotionally, starting over mentally. The wealthy avoid this by designing lives that continue progressing, even when motivation disappears temporarily. That is maturity. Understanding that success should never depend entirely on emotion. Think about pilots flying through violent storms. They do not rely on feelings while turbulence shakes the aircraft. They rely on systems, instruments, procedures, structure, because emotions become unreliable under pressure. Financial life works the same way. Storms will come, unexpected bills, economic downturns, fear, loss, uncertainty. And during those moments, systems become lifelines. A person with no structure panics emotionally. A person with strong systems adapts faster because stability was already built beforehand. That is why wealthy individuals focus so heavily on process instead of temporary emotion. They think in terms of repeatability. What can continue producing? What can operate efficiently? What can remove unnecessary friction from my life? Those questions create scalable success, and scalability changes everything. A system can grow beyond your immediate physical effort. One automated investment strategy repeated for years can transform a person's future completely. One business process can serve thousands. One consistent habit can alter identity permanently. That is the hidden power of repetition. Most people underestimate it because repetition looks boring. But boring things build extraordinary lives. The gym, the investments, the reading, the saving, the routines, the systems, repeated quietly for years. Then suddenly everyone calls the result success. But success was never sudden. It was structured. You must stop romanticizing emotional bursts of motivation and start respecting disciplined systems instead. Motivation feels exciting, but systems create transformation. Motivation burns hot like fire for a moment. Systems burn steadily like engines built for distance. And wealth is a long-distance game, not a sprint. That realization changes how you approach life entirely. You stop chasing intensity. You start building sustainability. That shift creates peace internally because you no longer feel trapped inside emotional inconsistency. Your life gains rhythm, stability, direction. Financial growth becomes less dependent on mood and more dependent on structure. That is powerful, especially for people who spent years feeling financially chaotic. And the beautiful part is this: you do not need massive systems at first. Small systems change lives too. A simple automatic transfer into investments each month, a fixed routine for learning valuable skills daily, a structured schedule for business growth, a habit of tracking spending honestly, a system for reducing emotional purchases. Tiny systems repeated long enough create enormous outcomes, like rivers carving through mountains over time. Do not underestimate small, disciplined actions. History is built from them. Empires are built from them. Wealth is built from them. Right now, your current systems are already creating your future whether you realize it or not. Your routines, your habits, your automatic behaviors. They are shaping your financial destiny daily. That truth should wake you up, because if your systems are weak, your future becomes fragile. But if your systems are strong, your future becomes resilient. And resilience creates freedom. So stop waiting to feel ready. Stop depending entirely on motivation. Build structures strong enough to carry you through difficult seasons. Build systems that protect your goals when emotions fluctuate. Build routines that align your daily actions with the future you say you want. Because wealthy people do not rise through random bursts of inspiration. They rise because they created lives where success became automatic. And once your systems begin working for you instead of against you, your entire life starts moving in a different direction. Chapter 9. Becoming the person wealth flows toward. You don't attract what you want. You attract what you are. Wayne Dyer. There's a moment in every person's financial journey where strategy stops being enough. You can learn the rules. You can study the systems. You can memorize the methods. And still, something feels blocked. Like the opportunity is close, but not landing. Like money comes in, but doesn't stay. Like success brushes your life, but doesn't settle inside it. That is the point most people misunderstand completely. They think the problem is external. It is not. The real shift begins when you realize wealth is not just something you do. It is something you become. Most people try to upgrade their income while keeping the same identity that created financial struggle in the first place. That never holds. Because money does not just respond to effort. It responds to character under pressure. It responds to discipline when nobody is watching. It responds to emotional stability when things go wrong. It responds to how you think when fear enters a room. And fear always enters a room. Always. The question is not whether you will feel it. The question is what kind of person you become when it shows up. There's a quiet truth most people avoid because it forces responsibility inward. Money amplifies identity, not ambition, not wishes, identity. If someone carries chaos internally, more money increases chaos externally. If someone carries impulsiveness, more money multiplies impulsive decisions. If someone carries insecurity, more money becomes a tool for hiding insecurity, not healing it. That is why some people earn more but never feel richer, because nothing inside them changed. The same emotional reactions, the same thought patterns, the same invisible habits steering financial behavior like an unseen hand. You might have noticed this already in small ways. A little extra income comes in, and suddenly decisions become faster, less thoughtful, more emotional. Spending increases, pressure increases, confusion increases, not because money is the problem, but because identity was never upgraded to hold it. There's an uncomfortable gap most people live inside. They want financial expansion, but they haven't built the internal structure to sustain it. So every increase becomes unstable, like pouring water into a cracked container. It leaks. Always. That is why wealth creation eventually becomes less about tactics and more about psychological architecture. You begin asking deeper questions. Not, how do I make more money? But, who must I become so money does not destroy me when it arrives? That question changes everything. Because wealth does not just test your intelligence. It tests your emotional control, your patience, your ego, your discipline, your sense of worth when nobody is clapping, and most importantly, your ability to stay grounded when life gives you more than you are used to handling. Think of pressure like fire. Some identities collapse under it. Others get refined. Same fire, different outcome. That is a hidden reality behind wealth most people never see. It is not only about building income. It is about building capacity. Capacity to delay gratification when impulses scream. Capacity to stay consistent when motivation disappears. Capacity to think long-term when everything around you pushes short-term thinking. Capacity to remain calm when uncertainty shakes your plans. Without that capacity, money becomes dangerous. Not because money is dangerous itself, but because it amplifies whatever it touches. There's a reason certain people seem to attract opportunity repeatedly. It is not luck. It is alignment. Their identity signals stability. Their behavior signals trustworthiness. Their discipline signals reliability. Their emotional control signals maturity. And life responds to that signal. Opportunities move toward people who can hold them, not just desire them. You can feel this in real-life situations. Two people get the same opportunity. One panics, overthinks, hesitates, self-sabotages. The other responds with clarity, patience, and grounded decision-making. Same opportunity, different internal structure, and the outcome splits their futures completely. That is identity at work. There's a version of you that reacts to money emotionally, and there is a version of you that handles money strategically. One creates cycles. The other creates momentum, and the shift between them is not magical. It is built through repetition, small, disciplined decisions, private moments of restraint, quiet choices no one celebrates, consistent emotional regulation when things feel uncertain. That is how identity is rebuilt, not in breakthroughs, but in behaviors repeated long enough to become natural. Most people want transformation without discomfort, but identity never changes without friction. There will be moments where old patterns try to pull you back. Impulse, fear, comparison, doubt. They do not disappear. They just lose authority. And that is the real upgrade. You stop being controlled by internal noise. You begin responding from awareness instead of reaction. That shift is where wealth stabilizes. Because now your decisions are no longer emotional guesses. They are grounded actions. Think about what happens when someone finally becomes consistent with discipline. They start noticing something subtle. Money stops feeling chaotic, not because more money suddenly arrived, but because they stopped leaking it emotionally. They stopped reacting, stopped overcorrecting, stopped chasing temporary relief through spending, and slowly stability builds. That is the invisible foundation of wealth. Stability before scale. Most people try to scale chaos. It never works. First comes order, then expansion, then multiplication, then mastery, and underneath all of it is identity. The version of you that no longer negotiates with excuses. The version that does what is necessary even when it is inconvenient. The version that thinks in years instead of moods. The version that understands comfort is not the same as growth. That version is not distant. It is built through choices you already have access to. Right now, today, not someday. Every disciplined decision is a vote for that identity. Every impulsive decision is a vote against it. And over time, votes become identity. There is a moment in this journey where something shifts internally. You stop asking, "Can I afford this?" and start asking, "Does this align with who I am becoming?" That question alone filters everything. Spending, relationships, opportunities, commitments. Because now your life is no longer driven by reaction. It is driven by direction. And direction creates power. Real wealth is not loud. It is not chaotic. It is not desperate. It is composed. It is intentional. It is steady under pressure, like steel formed under extreme heat, then cooled into something unbreakable. That is what identity transformation feels like internally. Pressure first, then refinement, then strength that no longer collapses easily. And once that happens, something subtle changes around you. Money stops feeling like something you chase. It starts responding to how you operate, not because you are forcing it, but because you are aligned with the type of person it naturally moves toward. At that point, wealth is no longer just about accumulation. It becomes a reflection, a mirror, showing you who you have become. And that is the real question this entire journey leads to. Not how much can you earn, but who are you becoming in the process of earning it? Because that answer determines everything that follows. Conclusion. Wealth was never designed to be the reward of endless exhaustion, but the outcome of clarity, structure, and intelligent thinking. The people who consistently build lasting financial success are not simply working harder than everyone else. They are thinking differently. They understand that money flows toward value, leverage, systems, positioning, and psychological strength far more than ever responds to raw effort alone. Hard work has its place, but without direction it becomes a loop of survival rather than a path to expansion. This is a quiet truth most people miss. Effort without design keeps you busy, but it does not necessarily make you free. This journey was never about glorifying struggle or encouraging passivity. It was about breaking the conditioning that says exhaustion equals progress. What you have really been learning is intentionality, the ability to step outside emotional reaction and begin making decisions that compound over time. You have seen that mindset is not abstract. It is financial architecture. Emotional intelligence is not softness. It is protection of your future wealth. Assets are not just possessions. They are systems of freedom. Leverage is not a trick. It is how small actions become large outcomes. Systems are not optional. They are what keep success alive when motivation disappears. You begin to realize that wealth is not built in isolated moments of intensity, but in consistent patterns of thinking and behavior. The way you manage your emotions, the way you respond to uncertainty, the way you structure your time, and the way you choose your relationships, all of it is quietly shaping your financial direction. Wealth is less about what you do occasionally and more about what you repeatedly allow yourself to become. At some point, the pursuit shifts. You stop trying to force money through effort alone, and you start building environments where money can grow naturally. You stop chasing outcomes and start designing systems that produce outcomes. You stop reacting emotionally to every financial fluctuation and start thinking in longer horizons, where patience becomes a strategy instead of a delay. And in that shift, something fundamental changes in your identity. You begin operating like someone who understands how wealth actually behaves. The goal was never to reach a point where you work yourself into collapse. The real goal is far more powerful: to construct a life where your decisions, habits, systems, and mindset continue working for you even in your absence. A life where rest does not interrupt progress, and where freedom is not something you chase, but something built into your structure. The moment you stop believing that struggle is a necessary price of success, your thinking begins to evolve. And when your thinking evolves, your behavior follows. When your behavior changes, your financial reality has no choice but to shift with it. Your new life does not begin when more money arrives. It begins the moment you finally understand that money has always been responding to the way you think, decide, and operate. And you decide, from this point forward, to think like someone who is ready to direct it, not chase it.